Morning. With just a couple of days standing between us and the beginning of a well-deserved spring vacation, I find myself with a lot on my mind when thinking about the past 6 weeks and all that we have been up to since the beginning of the second semester. And while it's always true that I hit this point in the school year with a lot on my mind and a lot that I feel good about when reflecting on what we have been doing since late January all the way to early March, there are always some moments that surface above others. Thus, in the midst of a full and impressive slate of great moments and experiences that all or some number of us have had together of late, I'd like to spend time on just 3 of them this morning. Please do not interpret that as a lack of appreciation or awareness of all that made our winter so rich and full. There are scores of classroom moments known only to those in the particular room at the time that were memorable, meaningful, mission-driven even. We learn in so many ways, by sharing and listening and thinking together, by valuing what others have to say, by virtue of having classroom time led by teachers whose lessons and example will be with you for the rest of your lives. The time we have spent together in dormitories, or with clubs, or with friends, or over a meal, are all part of what add up to our whole experience together as well. In some ways, the routine or ordinary are the stitching of the Brooks experience, unscripted and organic moments that just emerge and hold in our hearts and heads. I think of all the team experiences at every level and of every variety, and the fun and camaraderie and shared sense of accomplishment that comes from concentrated time spent together with a common goal. The truth is that the winning or losing or sense of how you performed will fade with time. The time spent with others will not, and we've had a lot of that. It's the connections that will hold. I had these remarks pretty much completed by the end of the day on Saturday, only to revisit them after an hour's worth of email exchanges late that night led me to reconsider what I'd planned. I will not presume to know all that much about what each of us had in mind when reading those exchange of emails, or what it left some number of us feeling. I do not have any interest in calling anyone out or determining what was intended by individual emails, or who was right or who was wrong. I do have 3 thoughts about the email strand that I'd like to share, however. First, the trouble with email or texting or some forms of social media is that all it does is appear on a screen. We do not hear email spoken. We do not see the person writing the email. An email's tone is elusive. Email's good for sharing information and scheduling meetings, in my view. It's not a good way to conduct meetings and have conversation. And I hope that we can refrain from that practice moving forward. Second, I think the topic is worth some further and better thought, and hope that perhaps it can be explored at tonight's community conversation or at a subsequent point, to do so in ways that extend goodwill to others and aim to understand a concern, as opposed to judging that concern would be a good way to begin. Third, at about 12:30 a.m. yesterday, after sending my cease and desist email, I had a decidedly different feeling than I did during one of the moments I had planned to share with you this morning. So I want to start with that moment, an encouraging moment, and then follow it with a moment that filled me with pride, and then finish with a joyful moment. The encouraging moment felt a bit more important to me late Saturday night because it illustrates what we can be when we are at our best. At a time when school campuses across the country are continuing to experience difficulty having what I would refer to as civil discourse, and the appetite to listen and hear and suspend judgment in challenging conversations seems to be in short supply, I was profoundly encouraged while simply observing 35 or so students start some dialogue about the results of the survey the school prefects administered a few weeks back. I appreciate that there are different points of view about the survey itself, that there are perhaps additional ways to look at that data going forward, and that what the response is illuminated is merely one survey at one point in time. I also think that trying to stretch our viewpoint diversity empathically and with care for what another's experience feels like at Brooks is an important part of our charge to help you understand what good citizenship is as you move in the direction of being great citizens and leaders in this community and in communities you will be a part of in college and beyond. I've noted at a number of receptions recently a conversation I had with a consultant doing some work with the school a couple of years ago. Perhaps I've even mentioned this in chapel, I don't recall. But the consultant asked me, what difference would it make if Brooks Schools ceased to exist? Why do we matter? He wondered. At the time, the question caught me off guard, but the gist of my answer then holds true now. I said that I think Brooks Schools' absence would mean fewer great citizens and leaders in communities all over the world because we learn the value and importance of community while we are here together. I would not be so bold as to suggest that we do this on our own, as other schools you've attended, your families, and involvement outside of school surely play a part. But I believe in my core that a Brooks School education will help you contribute more fully to communities you will be a part of throughout your lives. I felt that pretty powerfully when just listening to this group of students think together, listen well, and demonstrate a capacity to try on the shoes of others and, perhaps more importantly, care about how those shoes felt when wearing them. I witnessed an openness and enthusiasm for dialogue and chances to understand similar and divergent perspectives more completely. As we move into the spring and find ourselves planning and bumping into topics for subsequent conversation, as we just have this past weekend, I know that there's a lot of work involved in trying to do this well. I know that all conversations are not for all people, and I think that's okay. I also know, if I'm being totally honest, that stretching our conversation in the name of expanding viewpoint diversity and growing our notion of good citizenship excites me and worries me at the same time. My excitement comes from what we might realize and from what I witnessed just a couple of weeks ago. My worry centers on the degree to which we engage in conversation with open hearts, interest in broader understanding above all else, and firm in the notion that what other members of our community feel and experience matters to us, that we care for others as much as we care for ourselves. I was encouraged by those 35 students and will carry that feeling with me into our break. The moment that filled me with pride occurred while I was away from campus. In the aftermath of the horrible shooting at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida, I've been inspired by students in that school standing up for classmates and teachers in the epidemic of gun violence in schools and elsewhere that has been so inadequately addressed by our elected officials. To see students your ages in front of television cameras, forever traumatized by unspeakable horror, and displaying such extraordinary courage in the midst of their grieving was moving, heartbreaking, inspiring all at once. I've since read and watched various columnists and pundits point out the fact that all generations older than you and those in Parkland, mine, for example, have failed them when it comes to this issue. The columnists and pundits are right. Thus, when I received a copy of Jake Grant's email to all students a bit over a week ago, inviting you to participate in a walkout this past Tuesday morning, I was filled with pride. I wish I had been here to witness all of you in silence for 17 minutes to honor those who died so senselessly in Parkland. When I was contacted by a WBZ CBS 4 TV reporter for a comment on your walkout, I concluded that statement by saying the walkout was supported by Brooks faculty and administrators. I understand that a range of perspectives exist, even among us, about what might be done to ensure there are no more school shootings in the United States. Yet to start, where all of you and so many other young people are starting, by standing up, walking out, and being together in solidarity is inspiring. I was proud of your first step and hope that you will sustain attention and pressure on those in my generation to do something about gun violence. I've added my name and the school's name to an open letter to the president and our legislative leaders calling for action. We will hope to do more. I want all of you to know that your school stands with you and behind you and determined to do what it can to help to ensure the safety of schools all across the country. Don't sit down for too long. Finally, the joyful moment. This is hard because there are so many that each of us experience in different ways. Yet, I will never forget my 50th birthday, which all of you helped make one of the most memorable and meaningful birthdays I have ever had in my life, truly. I've thought about that day a fair amount over the past 3 weeks, and a number of things come to mind about it. For starters, I have cringed a bit when thinking about the concept of requiring the school to celebrate my birthday with me. You would not be out of bounds if you have somehow concluded that I am a hopeless narcissist. I mean, who declares an extended school holiday on his or her own birthday and then invites everyone to come have cake with him, like you had a choice? Still, the perhaps inappropriate and non-chapel-like moment of sheer, unadulterated joy that overtook the Ashburn Chapel on February 12th when I shared news that the school holiday was actually going to begin immediately was incredible. If you've left that behind, here's the Instagram clip that bounced around afterwards as a reminder of how happy and joyful you were.
Okay, now you have to tell me, what is it you've all been doing?
We were celebrating. Now I'm going to let Kate and Elizabeth tell you why. When school's announced and there's that roar of excitement, like to have to go from that moment, like back to class. I'm 50 today, half century. It's only going to happen once. And so our school holiday begins right now.
Pretty good. I confess to having thought since that time about Mr. Ashburn and whether he would have approved of that momentary lapse of decorum. This is his chapel, after all. I can't be sure, but I have landed on him finding his way to a wry smile when observing all of you that morning. For me, it was glorious. In fact, I would go so far as to say that this chapel has never been as loud as it was in that moment since it was dedicated on December 12th, 1930, a dubious honor perhaps, But imagine that. A decibel level never before realized in a building now in its 88th year of existence. That release of energy was good for the soul. And while it did not make all the work we're doing and challenges we're facing and complexity we experience in our lives go away, it did give us a window of time within which to pause and be present. I think that's important, that having fun is important, that communal joy is important. We should not make any apologies for wanting and needing moments like that. And I think you can rest assured that you were part of the most boisterous moment in Ashburn Chapel history, so you have that going for you. February 12th, 2018 will forever be a day that I'll remember, and I thank you for that. We are all ready for some time at a different speed and a temporary change of scenery. The break will do us a lot of good. Just know, as we close in on our time off, that the encouragement, the pride, and the joy I have felt with and in you this winter will hold, even and especially during harder moments. To live and work in a community where inspiration can be found simply by looking around is quite a privilege. I wish you a wonderful spring vacation, and we'll be glad to welcome you back to your school at the end of the month. Thank you.